Amy, let me tell you about a magical place that is so exactly designed to be enclosed space, year-round fun for the whole family that I bet you already know what I'm going to say before I even say the name. Let's say it together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Great Wolf Lodge. You got it, Amy.
My kids loved Great Wolf Lodge when we went. You probably already know that it has a huge indoor water park with a wave pool, lazy river, a bunch of massive water slides. But then your pack can hit the other attractions because wait, there's more.
Great Wolf Lodge has adventure-packed attractions like Magi Quest, a live-action game kids can play throughout the lodge, plus the Northern Lights Arcade. Spent some quality time there, so your kid who loves the lazy river and your kid who loves fantasy games will both have a great time.
Great Wolf Lodge also offers great dining options and complimentary daily events like nightly dance parties, all under one roof. Unpack the car once and you're settled in to have fun. And with 22 lodges across the country, you're always a short drive away from adventure.
We've both had such great times at Great Wolf Lodge, so bring your pack together at a lodge near you. Learn more at greatwolf.com and strengthen the pack. Hello, and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Margaret, and today I am so excited to talk to Dr. Meredith Elkins. She is a clinical psychologist specializing in the research and treatment of anxiety and related disorders in children and families. She is a faculty member at Harvard Medical School, you may have heard of it, and the co-program director at the McLean Anxiety Mastery Program at McLean Hospital. Her debut book, and I wish it wasn't January because I will tell you, this is one of my favorite books that I have read in the last calendar year, not just in the first 2 weeks of January. It is called Parenting Anxiety, Breaking the Cycle of Worry and Raising Resilient Kids. And I cannot wait for this conversation. Welcome, Dr. Meredith Elkins.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I'm just delighted to be here.
We were, I have to say, just talking a little bit before we got on, but I have to start with my favorite quote from the book. It doesn't matter if I ever get her to sleep, you say, talking about your daughter, infant. As soon as I'll wake up, some other fresh parenting hell will be waiting for me.
You guys have been...
she's one of our people, the fresh parenting hell.
Absolutely. You all have been a touchstone in my parenting journey for years. And I'm so... it was just destiny that we would be having this conversation. Thank you also for your really kind words about the book. It makes me feel so good that you've enjoyed it.
Well, our audience knows from listening for many years that I have been a lifetime sufferer or participant, depending on how you look at it, in anxiety. I had extreme postpartum anxiety, which was undiagnosed, and I only realized basically 10 years later, oh, that was not normal, what I was dealing with. And I've had OCD for my entire life. So I'm very well versed in all things anxiety. And one of the points that I love that you make in this book, my mother was a therapist, and she used to say, in talking to me about my own anxiety, listen, the anxious bunny survives. Anxiety serves a purpose in our lives, right? It's not just something to be cured or gotten rid of.
Absolutely. Your mom, God bless, was spot on, because anxiety does serve a purpose in our lives. And this is one of the first things that I always start off with when I'm working with a child or family. Actually, recently, I met with like an 11-year-old girl and her mom, and we were doing an intake. And at the end of the intake, I said, so, what are your goals for your work here with us? And she said, I want my anxiety to go away. And mom similarly said, we don't want this to be ruling her life. We don't want her to feel like this anymore. And that makes so much sense. Anxiety is painful. It feels painful. And it leads us to do things that we don't want to do. We duck out of life in so many different ways. But one of the first things that I talked about with this child and her mom was that we are not going to be getting rid of your anxiety, because we don't want to get rid of your anxiety. If you didn't have anxiety, you wouldn't look both ways before you cross the street. You wouldn't study for your math quiz. Grown-ups wouldn't brush their teeth before a date. We need some anxiety to help us, because it helps to make sure that we do the things that we need to do for our life and our well-being. Sometimes anxiety becomes more present and interfering than we want it to be. And in those situations, that's where people like me are here to help. We don't want to get rid of your anxiety, but we want to help you better manage your anxiety. And so that's always the goal here.
I am a huge metaphor person, and I loved the metaphor from the book about the beach ball. So tell us that metaphor, because I was like, yep, that seems just about right.
Sure. So imagine that your painful thoughts and feelings are like a beach ball floating on the surface of the water of the pool. And the pool is kind of like your subconscious. If you are bothered by your anxious thoughts and feelings, we all have the drive to get rid of that beach ball. And we want to push it under the water and get it away from us so that it doesn't keep bumping into us as we're swimming and going about our life. But think about how much energy it takes to push that beach ball under the water. You would have to literally push it and kind of lean on it, sit on it, and keep it down. It's a lot of effort to keep it submerged. And what happens as soon as you let it go and try to keep swimming? It's going to pop up. It's going to whack you in the face. And so this is what we find happens when we try so hard to get rid of our anxiety, to suppress anxious thoughts, is that it takes a lot of effort and it's not really effective. If anything, it kind of can create this ricochet. So what we're actually trying to achieve when we're managing anxiety in the way that we want, that we ideally should be managing it, is that the beach ball is just kind of hanging out on the surface of the pool. Sometimes it bumps into us and bothers us. But if we can just kind of notice it and exist with it, even when it bumps into us, then we can keep swimming and we can have a grand old time, even though it's still there.
Sometimes you need a metaphor to help you understand it. And that one really spoke to me. Now, that being said, we're not trying to rid anxiety. Yeah. Anxious bunny is going to make it. Anxiety is our friend to a certain degree. But as we look at ourselves and our kids, and I should say the book really speaks to both parents and children, because as we know, it's a system, right?
Absolutely.
So as we start to say, okay, we're okay with anxiety, we're going to coexist with the beach ball somehow. But for those of us, including myself, who have dealt with anxiety that is not normal or really interfering with our lives, you give 3 signposts to look for in terms of when anxiety is not normal. The first is interference.
Absolutely. When clinicians are trying to help determine whether somebody meets criteria for a clinical anxiety disorder, we're really looking for 3 things. And I try to guide families in this as well. So like you said, the first is interference. How much is anxiety and the symptoms of anxiety messing things up for you in your life? How much is it getting in the way of you doing the things that you love to do, doing the things that you need to do? And often within families, the interference isn't just with me as the individual struggling with anxiety. It can be an interference in family life. Is this impacting parents' work schedules? Is this impacting siblings? Can we not have friends over to the house because of my anxiety, right? Can my siblings not have friends over?
Right. We can't go places. We can't take family trips.
Exactly. We need to drive everywhere rather than flying because of my flying fear, right? So the ways that things mess things up for us, that's a real marker that this is more than just normative anxiety, that this is something where there is sustained interference that's messing up life for me and my family. And then the other 2 markers are distress and duration. So distress is, of course, subjective, right? It's hard to measure how much distress qualifies you for an anxiety disorder. But if we subjectively know that the child or the parent who's coping with anxiety is just like, this is just causing me so much distress in my life. Like I am unhappy. I am deeply bothered by this experience. That's something that we look for and we attend to. Again, there's no way to measure it, but it's important.
Yeah, I've said it times, if I'm waking up and my body feels like I'm being chased by a bear, I'm off the norm,
Right.
I'm not just feeling like, I hope today goes okay. I'm having like an overwhelming sense of anxiety that is very much out of proportion to what's going on around me.
Absolutely. And distress and interference are so tightly linked, right? Because if you're feeling such distress that it is disrupting your sleep, right? That's counting as interference. Or if it's you are so distressed that this is taking on, like most of your conversations with your loved ones are focused on this topic, right? That's another marker of distress plus interference. And then the other thing to be mindful of is duration. So we know that it is just a part of life to be experiencing anxiety, particularly around acute stressors, the beginning of the school year, right? Or coming back after the holidays. Transition times are a time where we expect to see anxiety increase. If somebody has been sick, we're just off of our game physically, and we're more vulnerable to kind of our emotional life. Or if there's been a big transition, like a move or a divorce or a death in the family, we expect to see anxiety increase. This is likely normal and transitory. When anxiety lasts, when it is persisting kind of beyond when the acute stressor is in place, that's when we want to take note and say, maybe this has reached a clinical level of anxiety. We have our work cut out for us when we're talking about anxiety, because the word anxiety is used colloquially, both to refer to the normative, natural, needed human emotion that we all experience, as well as a shorthand for an anxiety disorder. So if somebody's talking to me about, I have anxiety, it's like, me too. We all do. Otherwise, we would be dead.
Right.
Because it's protective. So I would love us as a culture to get better at differentiating between anxiety, the emotion, and anxiety when it's an anxiety disorder. Because I think that a lot of the confusion that we're getting on over-pathologizing normative stressors is due in part to that language issue.
Yeah. And this dovetails with the idea of intensive parenting and where we are currently as parenting. You talk about the Surgeon General's advisory, which we did a full episode on the podcast about it.
Thank you.
About maternal anxiety. And I don't want to say that, that we're doing it to ourselves, because we really avoid ever on the podcast being like, and moms, this is also your fault. Yes. Also recycling not well enough. Also solving, government problems. It's not our fault, but it is worth examining this idea of intensive parenting. So let's talk a little bit about intensive parenting.
Absolutely. And I think this is a feature that I found somewhat under-recognized and underexplored. And I'm so glad that we're going there, because it's so important. This was really punctuated for me as the book was starting to take shape. So early on in the process of the book, we signed my daughter up for Irish step dance class, because I live in a part of Massachusetts called the Irish Riviera, and this is how my people dance. And so she wanted to get involved.
No need to explain it to me, but possibly some people in our audience do not understand.
Yeah, it's wonderful, but sometimes requires some explanation. So we signed her up. She was so excited. And on the first day, she panicked. And I treat anxiety for a living. So you would think that this would have been my finest hour.
Walk in the park.
But I found myself really pulled in two directions here, because as a psychologist, I know, especially a psychologist who does this work, I know that what anxious kids need in the moment is for adults to validate, normalize, and encourage them to face the hard but safe thing. But I'm also a parent with a social media feed. And my social media feed was telling me that if I didn't pull her from Irish Step immediately, I was on track to create a foundational attachment injury. This is the origin of her childhood trauma, and that I was going to be dysregulating her nervous system. And I still don't even fully understand what that means when I see it, but it sounds bad.
Right.
And so you have this bad parent story that's really percolating, that is such a part of this intensive parenting culture that we're in, where parents get the message that we need to be utterly deferential to our child's distress as a marker of good parenting. And if we are not kind of prioritizing the emotional experience of our child and following their lead, that we are bad parents. And even if you do this for a living and you know that that message is wrong, because you've seen how actually the friction needed to do exposure work is really where the growth happens. When it's your own kid, you really question everything. And so in that moment, I became even more aware of how our culture is just amplifying the experience of anxiety for parents, and it's pulling for us to help our kids avoid distress in a way that is well-meaning in the short term, but is really crippling kids and families in the long term. And I think this is a really important area that we need to be exploring.
Super important. So important. We're going to talk about it more when we get back. Right after this break, I am talking to Dr. Meredith Elkins, and her book is called Parenting Anxiety. We'll be right back.
Hellions, it's time for some spring cleaning, and I don't just mean the coat closets. Doing your financial spring cleaning can actually be super easy when you let Monarch do your financial spring cleaning for you. One dashboard that gets your entire financial life organized. No more clutter, no more mess, no more logins scattered everywhere, just accounts, investments, property, and more, all in one place. Get your first year of Monarch for half off, just $50 with promo code FRESH. Monarch allows you to look not only at what you've already spent, but also to plan for the future. With Monarch, you can set savings goals, plan for big purchases, and notice spending trends before they become a problem. I can generate cash flow reports that show me what we spent this quarter, this month, what we're probably going to spend next month, and feel prepared, organized, and knowing how to plan for the future. No more surprises and a lot more clarity. Try Monarch. Use code FRESH at monarch.com to get your first year half off at just $50. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code FRESH.
Amy, when I'm having a good hair day, it usually makes my whole day better. And that's why on every day, I'm taking Nutrafol.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, and it's the #1 hair growth supplement brand personally used by dermatologists. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements are peer-reviewed, NSF certified for sport, and clinically tested.
Nutrafol offers multiple formulas for men and women, tailored to different life stages and lifestyle factors, so you get support that's actually right for you. Adding Nutrafol to your daily routine is easy. Order online, no prescription needed, with automated deliveries and free shipping to keep you on track.
Let your hair be one less thing to worry about. See visibly thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair in 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you visit Nutrafol.com and enter promo code LAUGHING.
That's Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code LAUGHING. My favorite skincare products actually feel more like self-care, like they're so nice to put on and they smell so good that I'm actually happy when I get to that part of my day. And I swear that is how I feel about Osea's anti-aging body balm.
Amy, you are usually the lotions and potions queen on this podcast, but I have to say, hard agree.
Osea's anti-aging body balm is a liquid silk body balm that combines the lasting hydration of a lotion with the firming power of a serum, leaving skin smoother and firmer.
This body balm is clinically tested and designed to deliver visible results you can see and feel.
So we've gotten to use this product for a couple of months now, and I swear I have really noticed firmer and smoother skin, like on the back of my hands. It's like getting a mini spa treatment from head to toe.
Get a spring-worthy glow with clean, clinically tested skincare from Osea. And right now, we have a special discount just for our listeners.
Get 10% off your first order site-wide with code FRESH at OseaMalibu.com.
That's 10% off your first order with code FRESH at OSEAMalibu.com. So I think this idea of being a bad parent, correct, anxiety producing, making us sometimes feel like we have to make the world easier for our kids. I also think we live in an age where there's just a generalized expectation that we are responsible for our child's outcomes, that we are in charge of cruise directing and caring for, especially as moms. And this is not coming from nowhere. This is coming from, listen, on the one hand, very positively, there's a ton of parenting information, right? My mom didn't have the option. I mean, she read Dr. Spock and she did what he said, you know. Now there's 4,000 books, including some really great ones. But I think this idea that there are answers out there that we just have to keep finding, and that every interaction is either gentle or wrong, or it's either
Right.
80s style parenting or terrible. And I think it's not only the idea that we just don't want our kids to feel hard things, but that we've been kind of overall convinced that there is a good way to parent if we could figure it out.
Right. It's parenting as brain surgery.
Yes, it's kind of more amorphous than just this is the way to do it. It's like, not only is my kid having a temper tantrum at the dinner table, but I read a book that said that kids in France eat frog legs at 2 a.m. and never complain.
So I must be doing it wrong. Yeah.
But now I feel worse. I think that book is intending to be helpful and it helps lots of people who have feeding issues. But I think that idea that there is a right way to do it is foundational to why we're so anxious.
Right. And I think it's certainly a tension that I've been aware of kind of throughout the process of writing the book and talking about the book is how do I not just add to the noise, right, with another book? And, one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that I am not a parenting expert. I have one kid and she's okay. Like she's great, but you know what I mean? Like I have one kid.
Right.
I am not a parenting expert. I am an anxiety expert. And we have a pretty shameful history in my discipline of blaming parents for their child's outcomes. And so we really want to be thoughtful about that. And I think one of the challenges is that because we want to be so mindful of not blaming parents, I think sometimes as clinicians, we fall into the trap of not examining the ways that parents are responding to anxiety that is well-meaning, but can be crippling down the road. And that's a really tough tension.
It's an excellent point, and I think the book actually does it really well. It's very hands-on. Every chapter ends with like, here's what you can take away. It's accessible, but it's really not about parenting. It's more about the science or the medicine of anxiety, the medical version.
Right.
And one of the things that you talk about, which I have found very useful for myself, is the role of psychological flexibility. So let's talk about that.
Yes. So psychological flexibility is really at the core of today's most impactful evidence-based treatments for a range of things, not just anxiety. Psychological flexibility is the ability to notice what's going on for me in this present moment, the painful, the joyful, anything that's going on for me in the present moment, and to be able to make a choice of how to act in line with my values. So if I have been asked to give a presentation and I notice anxiety increase because I don't want to embarrass myself in front of my classmates, I'm afraid that the teacher is going to criticize me, and I notice the urge to stay home, I'm just going to call out sick that day, but I choose to go and give the presentation even though I feel uncomfortable about it, that is being psychologically flexible. The other side of that coin is psychological inflexibility. And this is when our painful thoughts and feelings really hook us. They drive us to make choices that provide often short-term relief, but that aren't in line with our goals and values. So that would be if I'm like, you know what, I'm going to bail on the presentation today. I'm going to call out sick. I'm going to tell my mom I've got a 100-degree fever and I'm just going to stay under the covers. That is when I'm letting my painful thoughts and feelings drive my behaviors. And usually in the short term, that's super effective because we avoid the thing that's distressing. But in the long term, this creates patterns of disability and dependence and avoidance. So, what we want to do is really try to cultivate psychological flexibility. And we can do that in the moments where it's really hard, right? When we're doing a hard thing. We can also do it in moments that are just everyday moments. So when you set your alarm to go to the gym at 5:30 in the morning and you notice like, I don't really want to do this, but I always feel good afterwards. You're making the psychologically flexible choice when you get up and put your leggings on.
Terrible example for me. You will catch me never at the gym at 5:30 a.m., but I get the overall point. And I do think talking to kids about this is so useful. I mean, Beyonce, my favorite, talks about how she has trouble keeping her weight up before a tour because she gets so nervous she can't eat.
She won't eat, yeah.
Joe Namath, Oldie Lux Alert, back in my day, who played for the Jets, when he retired, they were like, oh, what are you thinking? He's like, I'm thinking I don't have to throw up every Sunday morning anymore. Nerves are part of accomplishment, right? I mean, anxiety can be like a thermostat of what you're doing, right? You're going to try something really, really hard. That's why you're feeling this nervous. But on the other side of that is something pretty thrilling, accomplishing something that scared you.
Right. When you're thinking back to your childhood and you're remembering the things, like the moments that really punctuated life for you, it's usually when there was something really challenging and like you rose to the occasion. When there was something hard or something unusual, like you got a curveball and like you managed it. It wasn't when like the well-meaning adults in your life swooped in and saved you.
Right.
So we're looking for this frictionless existence, and it's so easy to find right now because you can do anything from your phone immediately. And we have such an emphasis on wellness and feeling good. And it's so ironic because like if there's all this focus on wellness, why aren't we all better?
Right.
If being uncomfortable is the same thing as being unsafe, and we're all paying attention to this, why is child mental health declining and parent well-being is tanking?
Stranger Things just wrapped up and people keep asking on the internet, was it really like that? Did kids really just ride bikes around all day and get into adventures? And the fact is they did. And they got hurt more than they do today.
Yeah.
I mean, they did statistically, right? And I think that you recognize that really well in the book. And that part of this is not just, stop being so hovering and worrying. But really look, what are you afraid of will happen? Like if I take my child to school, actually, I don't know if this is statistically true, but if I imagine I drive my kid to school, they're going to be much safer than if they bike to school where lots of different things could happen to them. Or if I let my kid go down to the city to watch a movie that he wants to, that's less safe than if I drive him to the mall and wait outside the movie for him. And I mean, my husband from Texas used to drive on the highway in the back of a pickup truck unrestrained. Some of the reasons we stopped doing that is because we actually realized they were dangerous.
Right.
But then it feels like we have ascribed danger to too many things at this point. That the idea of like, I'm not advocating for kids riding in the back of a pickup truck on the highway without seatbelts. But how do we find a line where we're comfortable? Because let me tell you, when my husband thinks back to his childhood, that's his fondest memory for sure.
Oh, I'm sure it is, right? What a thrill.
But how do we kind of find the balance between, okay, that was awesome, as was like drinking out of whatever rusty soda can we found in a field, when we got thirsty. How do we find a balance between, okay, we really shouldn't have been doing that, and it's okay to let our kids explore and be free, understanding that they will actually face more dangers?
Well, a couple things come to mind. One is that this is a chance for parents to be really psychologically flexible, because if you're considering letting your kid bike to school and you're noticing what's coming up for you in that moment, so you're noticing the discomfort, you're noticing the anxious thoughts of like, this isn't safe, or something bad's going to happen. He's going to get hit by a car. He's going to get kidnapped. All the things that like our parent brains just manifest for us, seamlessly, all these terrors. Part of that psychologically flexible mindset is to be able to notice I'm having these thoughts, to be able to catch that and say, how realistic is this? Is my instinct to say, you know what? Nope, I'm going to drive you. Is that born out of an actual safety concern that is really likely to come true? Or is this something else? Is this part of the intensive parenting culture telling me that like good parents drive their kids to school, or good parents are protective of their kids' safety regardless of anything else? Like that is the number one priority, even if we're being over attentive to it. Is it the concern that the police are going to be called because my kid is solo in the neighborhood, right? Parents will say, I'd like to give my kids more bandwidth, but I'm afraid of what the other adults will say and think.
And not for nothing, you're not making that up. Like you will see your kid on the local town mom's message board being like, I saw these kids riding their bike. And who let them?
Yeah, it's real. But I think the practice of noticing that discomfort and the thoughts then gives us the opportunity to pause before we make a decision. I know you all had Dr. Ortiz on, Camilo Ortiz, with his independence-focused therapy. And I think, that is such, if you're looking for kind of how do I get started here in pushing the envelope of like my own discomfort to sort of build capacity for my kids, it is these independence-focused tasks, which can just be so meaningful. But I I don't want to go off on that tangent before hearing what you have to say, because I know it's important.
We'll link to that episode with Dr. Ortiz because he talks a lot about very practical exercises that you can do in this arena. But this is where I think we get back to the idea of like, this is not about, Mom, you're doing it wrong. You stink. Here, you could be better. There's someone in Belize who's figured this out, not you. It really is an idea. And this is, I mean, maybe the thing we talk about most on this podcast. Amy calls it a thin piece of paper, putting that piece of paper between you and the reaction, that pause that happens that we often don't allow to happen. And then being able to, I work a lot with my own therapist on what could happen. What are you afraid that could happen? Let's think through what's going to happen. Because if you just say, I'm going to grit my teeth through it, you're not really dealing with it. But if you say, you can't go because I'm too afraid, you're also not dealing with it. So when we come back, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics on earth because I don't get out much, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I am talking to Dr. Meredith Elkins. Her new book, fantastic. Can't wait for you to read it, Parenting Anxiety. And we'll be right back.
All my kids learned to swim when they were little. It was super important to me that they be confident and safe in the water. There was only one problem with that, taking them to swim lessons. I mean, the pools were freezing. There were always cranky adults doing laps right there. And it was definitely not, for any of us, what you would call fun.
Amy, heard. But now there's Goldfish Swim School. Goldfish takes a really thoughtful approach to swim lessons, combining research-based teaching with a warm, kid-friendly environment that actually helps kids thrive in the water.
Every detail at Goldfish is thoughtfully designed to create a golden experience, from shiver-free, warm indoor pools to comfy waiting areas for parents to professionally trained lifeguards on deck.
Goldfish uses an approach called the science of swim play, which combines guided play with proven teaching techniques to help kids learn to swim, build water safety skills, and gain confidence all at their own pace. Lessons are designed to meet kids exactly where they're at.
If you've been thinking about swim lessons or just wondering where to start, this is a great opportunity. Right now, Goldfish Swim School is offering a waived membership plus your child's first lesson free at participating locations.
Just visit goldfishswimschool.com/free to find a location near you and enroll using promo code FREE.
That's goldfishswimschool.com/free, promo code FREE.
At DSW, we ask the important questions, like, what shoes are you going to wear? Whether you're prepping for wedding season, festival season, or just planning the ultimate vacay, the right shoes can make or break an RSVP. So own the moment. You've got big plans, and we've got just the shoes. At the perfect price, of course. Get ready to get ready with Designer Shoe Warehouse. Head to your DSW store or dsw.com today and let us surprise you.
So you talk in the book about cognitive behavior therapy. Just explain to us a little bit what CBT is.
Sure. Well, cognitive behavioral therapy recognizes, first and foremost, that every emotional experience that we have, anxiety, boredom, joy, sadness, is actually made up of three different components. So what we think, what we feel, and what we do. And most people come to therapy because they don't like how they feel.
Right.
They don't want to feel anxious. They don't want to feel sad. They don't want to feel angry. Or they feel really bothered by the thoughts, or they feel really bothered by the thoughts that accompany those feelings. But we recognize that you can't just eviscerate the feelings. I can't just command for you, Margaret, just be happy. Calm down.
Wait, it worked.
Don't have,
It's all
I know.
great now.
Genius.
As they say in a tweet, I think, no one in the history of the universe has ever calmed down after being told to calm down.
It's just not effective.
In fact, it does the opposite.
In fact, it does the opposite. Absolutely. So we can't just eviscerate our feelings. We actually don't have much control over our thoughts. We can't actually control the thoughts that come into our mind. What we can do is change our relationship to our thoughts, right? We can, as you were just saying, we can kind of examine the evidence for and against that thought. Because if we're getting hooked by that thought, again, being psychologically inflexible and operating as if that thought is gospel and that drives our behaviors, if that's not a true thought, or that's not a real helpful thought or a reflection of a reality, we're doing ourselves a real disservice. So cognitive behavioral therapy helps us to address the thoughts, but I would say even more importantly, it helps us to address the behaviors. So what we do because of the anxious feelings and the anxious thoughts. And out of everything on earth, this is both depressing and empowering, so buckle up. Out of everything on earth, the only thing that we actually have control over is our own behavior.
Right.
It doesn't always feel like we do, but that is the only thing that we can control. So what we find is that if we can shift our response to anxious thoughts and feelings in a way that is values consistent, over time, the power of those distressing thoughts and those distressing feelings diminishes. So that's what CBT is. We're focusing on the C, the cognitions, and the B, the behaviors, to then help with the feelings. And a cognitive behavioral approach to this treatment of anxiety is the gold standard approach to treatment. So this is like recommendation number one. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for everybody all the time, but if anxiety is part of the picture, anxiety disorder is part of the picture, this is a really good starting place. And the core component of CBT for anxiety is exposure therapy. And exposure therapy is based on the understanding that when we feel anxious or uncomfortable, it is just the most natural thing in the world to try to avoid that discomfort. And in the short term, that works beautifully. But in the long term, that avoidance can have real consequences, because when we avoid what makes us anxious or uncomfortable, it teaches us that we can't handle that situation, that feeling, that circumstance. And so, ironically, the next time we encounter something similar, our anxiety is going to go up higher and faster and be even harder. It's going to be even harder to resist the urge to avoid. Exposure therapy turns this on its head, and we gradually and planfully help folks to face the things that are uncomfortable. And that's where the confidence comes from.
This we have talked a lot about as the idea of like the wolf at the door, right?
Yeah.
You think there's a wolf outside the door, and then you're thinking about it and you're like, nope, I'm just going to cook dinner and forget about that stupid wolf. But then the wolf gets bigger fangs. Like it just gets scarier and scarier. And it's always a better idea, I think, to probably open the door, just look at it and be like, okay, what's going on here? And for myself, when I had very bad postpartum anxiety, I had a lot of like intrusive thoughts. You know, I'm going to hurt the baby. I'm going to throw the baby out the window. And I would think like, nobody can ever know I had that thought. What a terrible thought to have, you know? So push that thought away. And of course, it wasn't like, great, worked perfectly. You pushed it away and now it was me pushing the beach ball under the water, right? And just really working in therapy at looking at pieces of it and saying things out loud. And I try to say to my kids all the time, there's no thought that's too scary to say out loud, because we all have feelings of like, I want to kill that kid who stole my lunch or kicked me in class. And it's okay to say that feeling, but it's not okay to do that behavior. And I think a lot of us were raised, I'm not talking about myself, but many people were raised in households where feelings were not really respected. Suck it up. Stop worrying. That's a ridiculous thought. Like, who would ever throw a baby out the window? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You're never going to do that. Don't stop thinking about that. And so how do we start to change those patterns when we have been told like, your emotions, tweet, as Amy's grandmother would say, like, get over it. Mm-hmm. Calm down. Stop worrying.
Well, I'm so sorry that you had the experience of postpartum anxiety. I'm so glad that you talk about it, because I think it can be such an under-recognized and impairing set of circumstances for new parents to be coping with. And it reminds me of my patient, Marta, who I bring up in the book. Marta was a mom who I saw during the COVID pandemic. So we were meeting entirely virtually, and she had just had her first baby, and she developed panic disorder. And her fear was that she was going to hurt her baby, Elias, while she held him. So she became increasingly dependent on her husband. Every time she held Elias or changed him or fed him, she needed her husband to be in arm's length, because she was afraid otherwise she would drop him, she would panic, she would crush him. And the anxiety about this just sucked the joy from her early experience. and just stole so much from her. She was also so deeply ashamed of this experience because she had imagined her child's infancy like this blissed out, like mama,
Right.
diaper
Here comes the
ad,
baby
right.
down the rainbow into my loving arms. Yep.
Exactly. And so she just felt like she was failing her son and her husband in every way. And the more that she required her husband to be right there with her and the baby, the worse her panic became.
She's shoving down the beach ball, right?
She's shoving down the beach ball, and it just gets harder and harder to resist. So we did exposure therapy where we gradually had her hold her son with her husband moving further and further away. And I describe in the book the session where he is in one room on the other side of the door and she's in the room and was solo for the first time. And I challenge her to stand up with the baby. And that is just so challenging for her. But that friction is where the growth comes. I think that to circle back to your question of like, how do we challenge this thing of, we can't talk about this? I think sharing stories like this and learning from the experience of other people who have articulated honestly these fears, even if they seem very shame-laced, can help bring this to light. And not just I'm having these scary thoughts that make me question myself, but I'm having these scary thoughts. I know there's treatment out there that can help me. And by actually leaning into them rather than leaning away from them, that's actually paradoxically how we take the power from them. And you don't have to wait until you have a full-blown anxiety disorder to benefit from this approach. I think this is the thing that's so important. This is why the book is written for parents who are coping with just normative anxiety, just the stress of life and parenting, as well as those who are coping with an anxiety disorder in themselves or in their kids. We can apply this exposure-based model to everyday situations. Discomfort should be a red flag, not to avoid the thing, but to get curious about it and say, like, what's going on here that I'm trying to shrink from this? Can I challenge myself to take a step toward it? And if we can give that foundation to our kids, I mean, that's such a powerful story for them to grow up with. And then they can integrate that into their life moving forward.
My favorite part about the scene with Marta, the woman holding her baby, is that you have to say out loud, yeah, there is risk. There is always risk. It is true that you could drop your baby. Like, of course, it's not the biggest truth of the story, but it's this idea of integrating the truth and the reality of the situation, but not letting the anxiety blow that reality so far out of proportion. And I think through CBT, that's something I've really learned is I still have OCD. I still have a lot of compulsive behaviors. It used to be something that was like, this is very shameful. No one can know I do this. God forbid I do this in front of my kids. They will know I'm crazy. I can't ever let them see me like touching this picture when I pass by it. And working in therapy to be like, this is how my anxiety manifests itself. And I try to use it as a thermostat for what's going on in my life. Like this behavior is how my brain happens to process anxiety. And I don't try to stop it or shame that behavior. But as I use that behavior as like, okay, I'm having a very anxious day. Stayed up till 3 a.m. reading the news. That probably wasn't the greatest idea. Feels like everyone out there is fighting with each other. I'm freaking out. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no control over it. I touched 86 things on the way from my bedroom to the kitchen. My norm might be 12. So I know that's just teaching me that I'm very anxious today. And like, are there exercises I can do? And I think what I love so much about this book is that it's about changing our relationship with our emotions. It's not about fixing our emotions.
Absolutely. I love the way that you're framing the level of your anxiety, the level of your symptoms as a thermostat, because I think that when you're like, okay, this is an indication that like I'm running hot today, rather than this is an indication that I'm broken. Because then you have not only the anxiety, but you have the shame.
That's right.
Like the painful feelings pile on, which makes it so much harder to cope.
And that's a dynamic that I completely changed through therapy, through CBT. And I think for my kids, it's just been so helpful to say, it's all the beach ball. you can shove this down, or we can sit and say, listen, if you go to the city by yourself, I'm worried, but as I think about it, I think you'll be fine. Something bad could happen. And this is my kid who wants to be independent. For another kid who's like, I wish I could try out for the school play, but I might embarrass myself. Okay, let's sit down and break that down. What would it look like? I mean, the phrase that I use most in therapy is, what's the worst that could happen? And it's just the idea of like, it's not too scary to think about. I mean, even if you dropped the baby, like the baby would probably be okay. Maybe we sit through something cozy while you hold the baby. But the ideas are not too scary to think or feel has been so important. And the way that you were able to capture that in this book, I just found so, so useful.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I really do hope that the book can be looked at as reframing negative emotions, like painful emotions, like sadness, anxiety. I say in the book, sadness is a normal, necessary emotion that just has like really bad PR. Sadness has a function. Anxiety has a function. Shame has a function. If we're measuring success based on how little painful emotion shows up, rather than how well we're tolerating painful emotions when they show up, we're going to stay stuck in this intensive parenting cycle where we are working overtime to curate positive experiences for our kids and neutralize negative ones. And that is a fool's errand because we can only control our own behavior. We're not going to be able to bubble wrap our child's experience. That's not saying like FAFO parenting, just like, let them out and see what happens. We can still be conscientious parents. But if we can model for our kids that we can tolerate some of our own discomfort when they're doing something that is probably okay, that we're not super jazzed about, but that we know is good for their growth, that is such an important frame for them to have. That it's not like everything needs to be perfect in order for me to do something hard. It's that I can do something hard even when everything isn't perfect.
Absolutely. I cannot recommend this book more highly. Parenting Anxiety, Breaking the Cycle of Worry and Raising Resilient Kids. It is published by Crown. It is available now wherever books are sold. And Dr. Meredith Elkins, tell us where else our audience can find you and where they can find the book, although people know how to buy a book in 2026.
You can find the book at all good booksellers.
And at the link right under this episode. So go click it.
Yes. You can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Meredith Elkins and on Facebook and on LinkedIn. You can follow me through my website where I have speaking engagements that I'm doing. And I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you today, Margaret. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was an excellent, excellent book, as I've already said, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Stitch Fix. Shopping is hard. Let's talk about it.
I don't have time to shop for clothes.
I have to buy everything in 3 sizes to find one that fits. They know me at the post office. Workout wear is my only wear.
Stitch Fix makes shopping easy. Just show your size, style, and budget, and your stylist sends personalized looks right to your door. No subscription required, plus free shipping and returns.
Oh, wow. That was easy.
Stitch Fix. Online personal styling for everyone. Take your style quiz today at stitchfix.com.